So, like AMB Burfoot said, as we run, we become. Each mile has its own experiences. There are challenging miles, whilst there are miles as a runner can run with an ease and flow. So, Nathan, we'd like to know what have been some of your key hurdles that you faced from the HR lens, and what was your mindset and approach to overcoming those hurdles? And finally, of course, what has been the impact on the organization and its people? Over to you.
Hi, Pyle. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being with you on this platform. I don't know whether this was by design or default. Life has been a lot of happenstance. I wanted to be a career engineer. I had enough marks for it in school. I got admissions to a top-notch engineering college. This was in Nagpur. I also got admissions into a medical school in Nagpur, where I was doing my high school there. And my father said that he didn't have enough resources to have me study there because he had then relocated to Madras. And so I came to Madras and I wanted to do engineering, and everybody shut their door on me because I was late. Ultimately took up mathematics. Now mathematics is not a subject that I particularly like. And I wanted to do economics. So I took up mathematics with a certain vigor. And I told myself I must do well in maths, and long story short, I turned out to be the best outgoing student of my college, Vivekananda. And then again, when I went into high studies, when I went to XLRI, I wasn't very sure whether I should choose business management or I just, okay, let me just take something. And I don't know what I ticked, and I guess I ticked the one which is about, in those days it was called personnel management, actually industrial relations. I ticked that box. First job on campus was from a very leading company. This was in marketing. And the other one was in human resources. And I was not sure whether I should go that way or this way, but somehow that instinct told me that I should stick with human resources. So I stuck around. So over a course of the last almost 35 plus years, I realized one thing about the way that this happenstance and how things have moved along, which is, if you don't get what you like what you get. And once you do that, you really go hell-bent for leather. All you need to do is, you know your true north, just keep going there. There's no point in trying to have a compass which says so many degrees north and longitude and latitude and you get to that. No, it doesn't. Life doesn't happen that way. Our careers don't happen that way. But as long as you have your true north and say, this is where I'm heading, this is what I would do, and it's almost like a process. You give your best. It turns out that it gives back all that you gave to it.
I think the take value from your experiences to know, because you are so phenomenal at storytelling. You almost make those stories come alive for us. One or two challenges that you may have faced in your career, and how did you really turn those around in a business context, in HR context? So, like AMB Burfoot said, as we run, we become. Each mile has its own experiences. There are challenging miles, whilst there are miles as a runner can run with an ease and flow. Nathan, we'd like to know what have been some of your key hurdles that you faced from the HR lens, and what was your mindset and approach to overcoming those hurdles? And finally, of course, what has been the impact on the organization and its people?
Brought up the metaphor of running almost as if you know that I was an athlete once. I was, and I remember a race that I ran several years ago, and that race was had been won by a person for almost 14 years on trot, and he would never lose. I was a young boy then, and I set out that race, and almost halfway into the race, I knew I was going to give up because this gentleman was far ahead of me. There was no way that I could beat him. At that date, it was the 26th of January, biting cold, heart of Bihar, and you had a gentleman who was on his green colored Chetak, a bright red yellow turban, driving his Chetak close to me, and he's yelling all kinds of expletives, and he's goading me to run, and he says, don't you have this in you, don't you have that in you? And I ran and I ran and I ran, and all I knew that was at that point in time I just ran. I have no idea what happened, but all I realized at that end was this gentleman called Vincent Lakara was going to run the last 10 meters. There was this young boy who breasted that tape ahead of him. And I'll never forget that day. Not because that race was won, but the fact in our lives you need a Daljit Singh. Somebody who, even if you did not ask, they would run along, they would come by, they would goad you, they will coach you, and they would be there by your side. So I guess in whatever that we do, is there a way that we can stand for another person? And by the way, can we also look at the Daljits in our lives? Using this gender a little more broadly. But it's very important to have somebody, because if you're looking at a career, then that career is always punctuated by people who are your sponsors, people who are your mentors, people who are your coaches. And each one of them play a very distinct part in your life. Translate that in an organizational context. How will you make sure that people who are working with you feel comforted, because the entire organization has a lot of Daljits with them, and they are the people who are in a coaching environment able to help people who are along the way. Because I believe we all will have to set goals, and you'll be surprised how you exceed all those goals.
So on that note, I'm going to go on to the next question, quite related with what you spoke about, Nathan, where I'd like to quote Josh Berzin. He mentioned the idea of being an irresistible organizations in his predictions for 2022 report. And among meaningful work, like you said, strong management, growth opportunity, trust, well-being, quite in sync with what you spoke about right away. That need to create a certain positive environment for people to feel welcomed, embraced, and included in the fabric of the organization. So my next question really is, how does HR play a pivotal role for organizations in managing the employee experience, especially through driving rewards and recognitions or benefits towards creating a certain culture, making the employees feel comfortable? And I think you also shared in one of your talks earlier, you said that really the experience lies in the eyes of the beholder. So on that theme, what is it that HR is doing in terms of driving rewards and recognition and benefits for employees?
It is a riveting question. Let me give you some statistics. 100 people get trained in an organization. And if you look at the attrition in that organization, out of every 100 people who are trained, people will leave you. Of course, the numbers in the pandemic should go to 20, but leave that as it may. About 12% will leave you. Recognize people in an organization. Maybe even reward people in an organization. Out of every 100 people that you recognize and or reward, only 6% will leave you. Prove recognition and reward are really strong points in any organization. It's one of the most powerful ways of keeping people back. Remember, I was walking down an aisle 2.5 years ago. There was, at the desk of a certain person, I found there was a card that was affixed, pinned onto that. I was curious, and with the permission of the person sitting there, I said, Benaifer, is it okay if I take a look at what is written there? And she said, sure, sir. And I saw that there was a few lines scratched on that paper, almost faded, and some words of endearment and thanking the person. And I read that and I put that back, and I told this woman, I said, Benaifer, this is almost, you can't read what is there. Would like to keep this? She said, this is 10 years old. Reminds me how valued I am. Getting for me that somebody would keep something like that. Today, I'd like to make a promise to myself that I will find something to find good in people at least once a day. Find something good in someone once a day. Nice it would be for organizations to do this every day. Not because it is programmed and there is a reward and recognition program and you have to achieve these targets, but to do it because it's the right thing for you to do. Build culture. If you come to rewards and recognition, and if you move it to compensation, I'll make a bold statement here. More than 35 years of working, I can tell you this, there is not one performance management system that anybody would say is a fair system. I would say that. I love your performance management. Really, I'm so much in love with the performance management system. Everybody would say this is not right and that is not right. I think the answer lies in how each one of us perceive our performance management systems to be. And the whole thing is about perception. The whole thing is about equity and fairness. Organizations need to spend a lot more time on equity. This thing about gender is about some stage in a woman's life. They would get married, they would be, and for let's say 6-8 months, perhaps even a year, the person is not at work. And organizations step out and say, we are going to be supporting you and being fair with you. And the sense of equity and fair play is seen by the woman who had taken that break. Is being seen. Do you communicate that? You might have a point where you say, yes, this is being fair. You may not, organization, not very many, but they'll put out the pay slips of everybody on our website and say, go take a look. If you feel underpaid, you can come and talk to me. I don't think companies are able to do that. But if you have a dialogue, and the dialogue is not about compensation, but the dialogue is about helping a person be a better person, nobody cares much about all of that. There are people who work for a purpose. Do we get that purpose part in any of our dialogues? Organizations do, right? They would take a leap of faith and saying, this is being fair, let's do it because it's the right thing for us to do.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective on the compensation as well as rewards, recognitions, benefits, and also, like you said, the small acts of conveying the culture and the thought and rationale behind is so very important to have that communication open with employees. And also on that note, I'd like to know if there are any best practices over your career that you would like to share with the audience. What is that one advice that you'd like to give HR professionals that's absolutely a must do?
Today, HR professionals must do understand, learn data, stay close to numbers. And where you feel that somebody is out of step, a best practice is to call that person, spend time with that person, and tell that person you're out of step with compensation. This is what I would like to do for you. I may not be able to do it immediately, just given that we are halfway down the year. But I would do this at the year end. I would do it halfway, whichever way. But the moment you call them and speak to them, then almost 90% of your work is done, because in their mind they would see you as being a fair employer. Go a very, very long way. And as long as you can connect with people and get them to feel valued, compensation will come 3 notches down. It's not on their list.
That in the spirit of the guiding light today, I'd like to also know who have been your guiding lights and how have they really shaped your thinking and your approach in life?
I, this is a very difficult question, Pai, because I don't think there is one single light everywhere. I remember the first light that I had in my life was I was a management trainee, and one of my first tasks, and I was almost just about a month old, and I was asked to go to a nearby government department and secure some work there and then come back, signing some files and handling some files and so on. It was not a very big job, but it needed somebody to get that job done. So and we were living in some quarters which the company had provided, and they were waiting for me at 7 o'clock, which would take me to this place. I noticed that there was this gentleman, it was a black colored ambassador, in his hand, and he was not cleaning the car, he was burnishing it. It was not a shine and a sheen, it was glass. And he was rubbing wax pol and he was polishing it. He was giving his life to it. And gentleman Ramlal Yadav. And I said, Jadavji, what are you trying to do? The moment it sets on the road, it's going to get dusty and dust will settle all over it. What are you trying to do? It stuck with me. He said, if you're going to do a job, do an outstanding job of it. If I had to clean my car, I must be the best cleaner in the world. You meet teachers in your life, guiding lights. I meet people like Professor T.V. Rao. Every time he speaks, pearls of wisdom. You have your colleagues. All you have to do is sit down and listen to them. They would tell you a lot more. I had a very close, I had a boss of mine who taught me the essentials of leadership. He was my guiding light. Nothing happened. It so happened I made a mistake, and then the general manager called me and he was shouting at me. He just would not stop. And at that point in time, this boss of mine opened the door, came and stood between me and the general manager, and he said, Nathan, you may go to your desk. He looked at the general manager in my presence and he says, the boy may be responsible, but I'm accountable. And then he walked away. I don't know what happened then, but the seeds of leadership were really lighted in that moment by this great light called Captain Nautiyal. And every time, we also don't realize that even when we walk out, there is still the sun. There are shades of light. There are lights everywhere. All it requires is for us to take a pause and see what it is. I learn a lot from my children as well. They're very thoughtful. I learn from my spouse, my wife. And there are people. And so, if you were to ask me who is that leading light in your life, I would say, I don't think there is one. But there are so many lights. I'm really blessed. It's almost like it's a Diwali every day.
That's really beautiful. You've really enlightened the place. And I love the metaphors that you've taken from the lights in the home to the sunlight, truly spoken in the spirit of the guiding lights. So I'm going to now shift gears to some HR trends. Just like in a relay, HR has evolved into an anchor position, very robust, nimble towards creating business structures and strategies to overcome crisis and manage business continuity. On that note, Nathan, I'd like to know one or two close trends, the trends that you follow in HR very closely, and you'd like the audience to also have a look at it.
Things that I follow very, very closely, Payal. What's happening in the world of technology? Now, technology right along the continuum, right from the point of pre-hiring, hiring, engagement, when people leave, again engaging with them, because all people who leave you are your ambassadors. So they are like colleagues for life. That's what we say in Deloitte. They are colleagues for life. We stay connected with them. Once you work with us, you will always be colleagues for life. Looking at technology across every one of these elements, this life cycle is going to be key to how HR can do a better way of working with and through people. Today, you have learning on tap. If I'm sitting in a place, I don't need a laptop. All I need is bite-sized learning on my PDA. If I need to communicate, how do I do that? How do I stay connected with people? How do I get a sense and a pulse of what is happening on the ground? All these are going to be important. So the first thing to do is look at technology trends. If you really have it within yourselves, spend time at technology fairs for human resources. You will learn a lot from there. What I'm following right now is this whole world of hybrid working and what is really happening in that world. Easier when you met people, you could see what was in their eyes, their gestures, the way people sit. You can make out whether they are bored. Today, you can't read 20 people on a screen. Impossible. So, how are we working in this hybrid culture? You have to be inclusive. For example, on a call, how can you be inclusive on a call? Today, down and take notes of how many people are attending this call. Have they all had their say? Do you think that there is a voice of the unheard you ought to be doing? It's getting tougher by the day. How are people managing this? How are they getting better at it? I think that's another thing for me to follow. The world of work in a hybrid world, the world of the workforce, and the world of the workplace, all of which are changing. So I'm very keen on following what are the trends out here. What is it that I could be missing out? So that's what I'm following.
Thank you so much for sharing. So two things you said, technology, and the second is the hybrid workforce. And I think that's going to be an upcoming challenge and is already a challenge of how do you keep your culture intact despite the changes that have happened or in the light of the changes that have happened. So that's a huge one, big chunk for HR and organizations to really focus upon. So that pretty much brings us to the last leg in our conversation. So on that note, the final question is, what is your sign-off line?
Sign-off line is, water cuts rock. Be resilient. You're capable of much more than you think. Never give up. Water cuts rock.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Nathan, for being the guiding light today on the Guiding Light series by Zaggle. It's been an absolute pleasure to interact.
Thank you, Payal. I completely lose myself in these conversations. You make it come so easy, make it so very easy for the person to speak. You get the best out of them. Today I lost myself, never realized that it's almost about an hour since we started this discussion. Thank you so much. You're an amazing host. Thank you very much.